Hello, it's Robert Bateman here again with another edition of the Privacy Corner, brought to you by Privado AI. Each week I talk you through my top picks for privacy-related news items, and this week I'll be looking at the new draft CCPA regulations, the privacy nightmare of connected cars, and the results of Ireland's long investigation into Airbnb. Try not to get too excited about that one. It is interesting though, of course. So let's start with these new regulations from the California Privacy Protection Authority, the CPPA. So let's clear up a few things first. When I say the CCPA, I mean the CCPA as amended by the CPRA. It's been a while now. Let's just start calling the law the CCPA. But it is useful to refer to the CPRA sometimes. So we've got two sets of regulations under this law published already. One came in 2020. I'll call those the CCPA regulations, and they were adopted by the Attorney General. And then the CPPA, the new agency created by the CPRA, has put out another set of regulations, which I'll call the first set of CPRA regulations. Hope you're still with me. Now, this second set of CPRA regulations, which was published this week, is still in draft. The first set is finalised but not yet enforceable, the date having been pushed back because the CPPA was so late to finalise them. So these second set of CPRA regulations in draft look at risk assessments mostly. So under the CCPA, businesses have to conduct risk assessments under certain circumstances. And these new regulations set out 7 situations in which you definitely have to do this. So they are selling personal information, processing sensitive personal information, using automated decision-making technology, processing personal information about children under 16, monitoring your employees, contractors, job applicants, or students, monitoring people's behavior in publicly accessible spaces, and using personal information to train AI models. I think that's 8, but forgive me. So what do you have to do when you're doing a risk assessment under the CCPA? Well, the CPRA regulations say that you'll need to include a short summary of the processing, the categories of personal information you're processing, context of the processing, consumers' reasonable expectations, information about the operational elements of the activity, so the technology you're using, for example, the number of consumers affected, the names of any service providers that might receive personal information, much more besides that, the purpose, the benefits, the potential harms of the processing, safeguards that you can employ, and whether or not they're actually effective, of course. So the draft regulations also mention some other stuff. They give us new definitions of artificial intelligence and automated decision making, which are very interesting. And they have some stuff in there about cybersecurity audits, which certain businesses have to conduct once a year under these regulations, and some new rules for service providers too. So these could take a while to be finalized. As mentioned, the CPPA is not renowned for its impeccable timekeeping abilities. They are looking at these regulations in a board meeting today, so we'll await news of finalization. Now, the next story I'll be looking at is about connected cars. Of course, modern cars, mine not included, collect a lot of personal data about their drivers, where they're going, what they're doing, even apparently when they're using the seatbelt and when they are using the brakes. So Mozilla, of Firefox fame, analyzed 25 car brands, connected cars, and looked at how they use data, how they allow drivers to control data, the track record of the manufacturer with regards to privacy and security, the security of the connected vehicle, and AI. So they found that the results were very bad. For all 25 car brands were given their privacy not included label. Only 2 of the car brands enabled users to delete personal data. That's Renault and Dacia. I think that's how it's pronounced. And not coincidentally, those are the 2 brands that are available in Europe, where the GDPR seems to have spared drivers from some of the worst data protection impacts of connected vehicles. Some statistics from the research: 84% of brands share personal data about their drivers. Not necessarily a bad thing, depends what they're sharing and why, but 76% allegedly sell personal data about their drivers, and 100% of them failed Mozilla's transparency tests with their privacy policies. Now, interesting to hear that Volkswagen apparently uses data about how people use their seatbelts and brakes, combined with their age and gender, for targeted advertising purposes. Not sure what products are appeal to people that use their brakes in a particular way or use their seatbelts more often than others. And Tesla was worst off from these tested brands, failing across all 5 categories designated by Mozilla. Now, lastly, let's look at Ireland's Airbnb investigation. So it's a long story. The background is, in 2015, someone in Germany submitted access and erasure requests to Airbnb, then under the Data Protection Directive, of course, logged back into his account in June 2018 to find that, in his view, they had not fulfilled the request. He complained to Airbnb, who asked for a copy of his ID to authenticate the request. He said no. They had a phone call instead, and basically he was not happy with the result of the request. They hadn't done his access request or deletion request properly, in his opinion, and they also gave him some correspondence in English, whereas he is a German speaker. So in January 2019, this individual complained to the Berlin DPA, and the following February, 13 months later, the Berlin DPA got around to forwarding this complaint to Ireland, where Airbnb has its European establishment. So that's 13 months on the clock from the date he complained to the Berlin DPA. We then have a further 22 months of back and forth between the regulators, the controller, Airbnb, and the individual. And the complaint investigation officially begun in December 2022. 10 months later, we get the result. So Ireland found violations on data minimization, legitimate interests, the right of access, transparency, and another transparency violation under a different subparagraph of Article 12. And the result for Airbnb, annual turnover around $8 billion, was a reprimand. So they also have to, there's a corrective measure, they have to write their cover letters in languages other than English where appropriate. So a long time for not much of a result. The EDPB was involved to some extent. I don't think there was a binding decision here, though. So that's my 3 items for this week. Subscribe to the newsletter for more details on all of these stories and links to all the relevant stuff, and also our recommended reading for the week. Thanks so much to Privado AI once again. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.